Well, we're back with foot pegs, and this time my cup runneth over with the options available, not just in thickness, but in length as well. Specifically, we'll be looking at different platform options, as you can see right here, from Motion Factory Racing. Now, in case you didn't see my first video, Motion Factory Racing makes this flex mount foot peg system. It actually allows for a little bit of tilt backwards and forwards to provide some additional stability for your foot and some additional comfort that I've found. I've actually been rocking these for a couple of months now, and I'm really enjoying them. So if you're curious, you can take a look at that video right up here. But since then, the good people at Motion Factory Racing have reached out and provided me a couple of additional items to show off to you guys, specifically this one today, the ADV platform, to allow for a little bit more room to play. And they also decided to give me some cleat options for different grip. But before we get into all of that, let's first take off the original trail platforms and actually ignore the fact that I have one of these in my hand. Let's go to the bike. You know, I think this would also be a good opportunity to show you the other feature with Motion Factory Racing's foot pegs, in that they can be completely disassembled and you can order specific replacement parts for this if you want to change something out or if something happens to break on you. That way you're not chucking out the full price that you paid for the original foot pegs. You can just get what you need. And don't forget, if you want to get those replacement parts or are interested in a full foot peg system, don't forget to use the code LEXDFOX when you shop at motionfactoryracing.com. Get you 10% off your entire order. So like any good renovation, let's tear this down to the studs. First thing we got to do is take off this cap right here. This is going to be a 6mm hex. Now immediately behind that cover, you're going to see this, which is a tiny little 8mm lock nut. So you're going to take your 8mm socket and go in there, loosen that. And once that lock nut is taken care of, you can slide off the entire platform right here. And be careful, because there's actually a little bearing right in here. It might actually be stuck on this stud right here, but if not, it slides out pretty easily, so don't lose this. Now that's all you need to do for the platform part, but if you want to keep stripping this thing down, the next thing is to take this bushing off, which is interchangeable, so you get 3 different options when you buy foot pegs from Motion Factory Racing for different flexibility, whether you want something a little softer or a little firmer. This gets taken off with an 8mm hex. Then if you really wanted to strip this thing down to the bare bones, you can actually take off this stud right here with an open-ended 14mm wrench, so you can slide it on right here and then loosen it off. This is the one that we just took off, the trail, as you can see right here indicated on the side. This is their standard foot peg. We're going to be, of course, comparing this to the big boy right here, the ADV. And just for fun, let's throw the stock peg in as well. And so right off the bat, you can see the differences in the size, and the width, and the length. Now it's actually kind of interesting, because at initial glance, this standard trail that you see in the middle here looks pretty short and stubby, especially compared to the stock one. But this is just the platforms that we're talking about, whereas this stock one right here is the full assembly. So we have to take that into account. If you take into account the actual stud and bracket in addition to these platforms, they do actually line up to be roughly the same length. So it's actually going to take up a little bit of space right here. So that just goes to show how much longer this ADV one is if you compare both of these at the same level, which is give or take right here. So obviously this one right here is going to provide a lot of added space. So keeping that all in mind, yes, I will still be testing this on my CRF 450, which is most decidedly not an ADV. Most likely at the end of this, I'll be sticking with the standard trail platform. However, there is one other thing that I am very excited about and want to try out for myself, which is the different cleat options that they have on here. As you can see right here, there is a slight difference in the bolts that are actually sticking up for this. This is different forms of traction. With a longer bolt, it actually sticks further into your boot and therefore gives you much more needed traction, keeps your foot on the peg and from sliding off. However, you can see on the ADV side right here, these ones specifically have shorter bolts. And with shorter bolts, it has a wider diameter, because you're looking at the actual diameter of the nut, not the diameter of the screw. And because it has a larger diameter, it actually has less traction. However, less traction is better in my instance. I ride this on the street. It's in Supermoto trim, and because of that, I'm just wearing normal street boots and I'm driving around on asphalt. I'm not on dirt. And so because of that, I don't actually need all the traction that this standard trail one that I've been using the last couple of months provides. I've actually found that my street boots are starting to get a little cut up because of this. It's a little too traction-y compared to the stock ones that I'm used to. So I'm hoping that with, at the very least, these smaller cleats right here, I can can get just enough traction that I need for street use, but not something that's overly aggressive that I'm actually ruining my street boots. Also, real quick, there was something else I wanted to point out, which is the design of this peg, because a few people mentioned in my first review about pivot pegs. Pivot pegs are also a foot peg option that tilt forwards and backwards. A couple of differences with that one though, those are spring loaded, so they actually kind of snap back into place from what I understand, so that could be a little bit traumatizing on the ankles. And also with the ankles is this design right here. You can see that it's a really sharp curve right here and then it slants downwards, so that allows for limited movement backwards, so it doesn't overextend your ankle, but allows for more movement forward. So now let's do some reassembly, of course, the reversive removal, this time with the ADV platform. And so we're going to start right here with the bushing of your desired flexibility at the bottom here. That's going to be your 8mm hex again, but this time righty-tighty instead of lefty-loosey. Next, we're going to put on our ADV platform, and already I've just dropped this little bearing right here that sits inside at the very end of this. So make sure that that stays in there, of course. You don't want to lose that, and just slide this onto the stud. Okay, so this part is going to be a little hard to show you, but what we need to do next is take that tiny little 8mm lock nut right here and thread it onto the stud way in there. And this is a little bit tricky. That's because even with a short little 8mm socket like this one, when you take the nut, it's going to slide into this socket, and then you're not going to have enough threads to actually push this in here and get the nut started. So what I do is I take my little 5mm right here and just slide it into the socket and push it up against the end of this. That way it's fully pressed against the threads when you throw everything in there, and then you can just kind of start to tighten it by hand. Then once you get a few threads on there, you can take the Allen or the stick or whatever you have out of there and actually tighten things down. Now don't tighten this thing too much. It literally just needs to be finger tight, because this nut is going to be up against a bearing right there and you don't want that interfering. And then finally with your 6mm, you're going to put that cap nut on top of it. This keeps everything nice and clean, so there's no water, no mud, no dirt that gets in there.
All right, quick first impressions. I got the ADV platforms on, and already I can tell, based on my bike and my riding style, this is really goofy. But I mean, if we're being frank here, this platform is not intended for this bike at all. This is going to be something more for those of you that actually have real ADV bikes, something like your BMW GS rider. It's a very wide platform though. I can really spread out on this thing, and just kind of pushing my weight from one foot to the other, it's much easier. I guess this platform would also be good if you're doing like touring or long distance cruising, because if you really wanted to, you can get really lazy with it and just sit on the arches of your feet and just really spread out. If you're doing it like that, it's actually quite comfortable. I'm also finding it a bit awkward when I come up the stops like this and put my leg down. I've been actually hitting my shin with the foot pegs because they're that wide. I think it's just muscle memory, and if you're getting these foot pegs, you'll get used to it, but it's just a little weird that I have to stick my leg out a little bit farther. It's just a little awkward right now. Oh, oops. Gotta watch out for that. One other reason why I want to stick to the standard ones, not these ADV platforms, is my specific case use. This is a supermoto on the street, and not saying that I'm anywhere close to scraping pegs. If I'm scraping foot pegs, then that means I'm already down. But if you're the type that's able to do that, then you don't want these because they're longer. Longer platform means less of a lean angle. I think it's quite clear at this point, I'm not going to be sticking with these ADV platforms. I'm going to stick to the trail ones that I had on it previously. But there is one thing that I do like about these ADV platforms, which I'm going to transfer over, which is the cleat size. After having used these for a couple of months with the original cleats, they were just too grippy, and I would find that my boot might get stuck on occasion if I just wanted to tap the brake or something like that. These ones though don't seem to be a problem at all. They feel just like the stock pegs, which in my view, perfect.
So we found our perfect pairing. As you can see, the trail platforms are back on the bike, and to make it that perfect pairing, let's swap some bolts. This is where that 7/32 inch socket and the screwdriver comes into play. It's pretty straightforward though. I don't have to tell you how to undo a bolt. Super easy and straightforward here. We're just going to be replacing basically these longer bolts for shorter ones. Now the bolts in question, you can get two different types. You can go with the US standard, which is a number 6-32, or you can stay metric and get an M3. Motion Factory Racing does provide bolts that you can get from them directly, but honestly, you can find these pretty cheap at any hardware store. Or you can go online and find some custom ones like these. They come in multiple different colors, which I found was really cool, so I will link what I found in the description below. So now we can see right here the difference between the tall ones and the short flush ones. Now these tall ones that I mentioned, these are going to be the 18 millimeter length, and these ones that I'm replacing them with are about 15 millimeters. So it's not exactly what I thought in the beginning. Big feet equals big platform. In this case, I'm actually going to stick with the standard trail. If you liked what you saw, feel free to scroll down a little bit from this video and give that subscribe button a click, maybe even the like button if you're so inclined. And if you're so inclined to absolutely just walk all over your foot pegs or are interested in anything else from Motion Factory Racing, go check out their website, motionfactoryracing.com. If you find something that you like, don't forget to use the code LEXDefox at checkout and get 10% off your entire order.